Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Lexa Peterson, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Gunner Rory Mackey. We warmly welcome the family of Private George Brian Elliott, whose story will be told shortly. This evening, we also warmly welcome members of the Defence Special Needs Support Group. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors to the memorial, and cadets on behalf of 338 Squadron, Shell Harbour, New South Wales. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed at the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who've given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private George Brian Elliott. George Elliott was born in the Sydney suburb of Granville on the 19th of April 1915, the son of George Brian and Mary Ann Elliott. Employed as a timber worker, he married Florence Price at the Anglican Cathedral in Sydney on the 30th of September 1939. The couple settled into married life in Mascot in Sydney's inner south. Their time together, however, would be brief. With the advent of the Second World War, George enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 26th of March 1940. George's family would also serve. Younger brother Herbert enlisted in July 1942 and served the duration of the war with the Australian Army Service Corps. Older brother Charles, known as Chicker, enlisted a few months after George. He went on to serve with 1st Anti-Aircraft Regiment before being discharged as medically unfit for service in 1943. According to the family, Chicker worked as a cartoonist for the Sydney Morning Herald. Another older brother, John, joined the Royal Australian Air Force in 1944 and was discharged as medically unfit after 10 months of service. Like Herbert, Charles and John, George would also survive the war. Entering camp at Ingleburn and then Greta, after initial training, he was granted pre-embarkation leave in early August 1940. Private Elliott was late in returning, however, and was confined to barracks for 7 days. With this punishment complete, he embarked for overseas service at the end of August. During the voyage, he was found absent from parade and was allocated extra duties as punishment. Arriving at Palestine in mid-October, Elliott marched out to join his unit, the 2nd 4th Australian Infantry Battalion. Private Elliott trained with the 2nd 4th in Palestine and Egypt before its first campaign against the Italians in eastern Libya. While the battalion played a small role at Bardia in early January 1941, it was more active during the battle to capture the port of Tobruk a few weeks later, and then fought even harder to secure the Wadi Derna at the end of the month. The 2nd 4th went on to become the 1st Australian unit to enter Benghazi on the 6th of February. By then, however, Elliott was missing in action, believed to be a prisoner of war. Confirmation of this status later came through a range of communications, including his name appearing in a list of prisoners of war in Italy broadcast by the Vatican radio station. Elliott had been captured at Machili, or Wadi Derna, around the 27th of January. According to later reports, Elliott and another private were on a patrol to collect Italian prisoners when a group of Italian soldiers waving white flags opened up with rifles and threatened the pair with machine guns. Elliott was initially interned at Homs in Syria before being moved to 3 Italian prisoner of war camps, finally ending up at Campo 106 in northern Italy between Turin and Milan. Campo 106 was not a prison in the traditional sense, but a cluster of work farm camps where prisoners were put to work in the surrounding rice fields. On the 8th of September 1943, news broke that Italy had formally surrendered to the Allies with a secretly negotiated armistice agreement which included provision for Allied prisoners in Italy to be handed over. The War Office in London sent messages to the numerous camps that prisoners of war were to stay put pending the arrival of Allied forces. German authorities, however, had no intention of leaving Italy, nor of allowing prisoners to be released. In some camps, pro-fascist commandants or the senior Allied prisoner of war enforced the stay-put order. In Campo 106, however, Italian guards opened the gates and left, leaving the prisoners unguarded. Elliott and the other Australian prisoners escaped, heading south towards the advancing Allied forces. Elliott made it as far as Ronseco before being advised to return north. He then walked to Santhia, where he boarded a train with some smugglers. The journey was perilous. If caught by German patrols, escaping prisoners could expect retribution and possible death. Leaving the train at Villa de Sola, Elliott continued on foot without a guide, eventually crossing the Swiss frontier near Montiveros with the assistance of locals and partisan groups. He entered Switzerland in mid-October 1943. While recovering in Switzerland on the 17th of June 1944, Elliott was involved in an accident that left him with a broken thigh, jaw, kneecap and arm. He was placed on the dangerously ill list and his wife was informed of his condition by telegram. After his condition stabilised, he was evacuated to England by aeroplane. Doctors wanted to amputate his left leg, which had sustained terrible damage, but Elliott refused. Discharged from hospital in mid-May 1945, he headed for home on a hospital shift, arriving in Sydney by way of Ceylon on the 28th of July 1945. In Sydney, Elliott's left leg was amputated at Uralla Military Hospital. He was discharged as medically unfit for service on the 17th of May 1946. George Elliott never returned to full health. On the 26th of January 1947, he and his pregnant wife were on a camping trip at Lake Illawarra. George collapsed while attempting to repair a broken tent pole in a storm and was taken to Wollongong District Hospital, where he died later that day as the result of a stroke. His wife, Florence, gave birth to a stillborn daughter a few months later. George Elliott was buried in Botany General Cemetery in Sydney, where his remains lie today. He was 31 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private George Brian Elliott, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.